The Saudi Stories channel welcomes you. Let us begin the tale. The Third Crusade. A tale of the quest for Jerusalem in the late 12th century. The Holy Land became a battleground between Muslims and Christians, with the city of Jerusalem, then under Muslim dominion, serving as the focal point of a protracted conflict. The dispute over control of this sacred city had reached its zenith, and from 1187 onward, tensions escalated dramatically. This was the backdrop against which the Third Crusade was launched, a campaign renowned for its complexity and historical significance. The rise of Saladin. The story of the man who unified the Islamic world in the summer of 1138. In the city of Tikrit on the banks of the Tigris River in Iraq, Saladin Yusuf ibn Ayyub was born, destined to become one of history's greatest military leaders. Yet, this young boy's life did not commence amidst glory or power. Rather, it unfolded as a lengthy narrative filled with challenges, upheavals, and transformations, leading him from servitude under minor rulers to becoming a formidable commander who altered the course of history. Beginnings. Upbringing and early influences. Saladin hailed from a modest Kurdish family of Turkic descent. His father, Najm al-Din Ayyub, was a distinguished military leader in the service of the Seljuk state. Though Saladin was raised in humble circumstances, his childhood brimmed with military education and lessons. He was sent at an early age to the city of Mardin to study jurisprudence, Sharia, and history, which helped him cultivate a robust religious foundation alongside his military skills. While Saladin's father served the Fatimid state in Egypt, the young lad learned much about warfare and politics in the Islamic world. However, the trajectory of Saladin's life dramatically shifted when Nur ad-Din Zengi, the Prince of Mosul, summoned Najm al-Din Ayyub and his family to his court to become part of his army. His initial steps in the realm of politics and military affairs. Saladin commenced his military career within Nur ad-Din Zengi's army, learning from the commander who played a significant role in uniting various Islamic territories against the Crusader campaigns that had besieged the Levant. Saladin served as an officer in Nur ad-Din's army and swiftly showcased his aptitude for war tactics and military leadership, capturing the prince's attention. Over time, Saladin emerged as a prominent figure in Nur ad-Din's court, ultimately attaining the position of commander of his forces in Egypt after Nur ad-Din secured significant victories against the Crusaders in the Levant. Through a combination of military savvy and leadership ability, Saladin increasingly undertook greater responsibilities in managing armies and orchestrating military operations. The phase of detachment from Nur ad-Din. The dawn of independence in 1169, the death of Shuraf al-Din, the Fatimid Caliph in Egypt, marked a pivotal turning point in Saladin's life. Egypt was under the rule of the Shiite Fatimid state, posing a substantial threat to the prevailing Sunni authority in the Islamic world. Saladin had previously been appointed as the minister of the Fatimid state and aspired to pave the way for Sunni Islam to become the predominant sect in Egypt. With time, Saladin, through his intelligence and courage, managed to diminish the influence of the Fatimid Shiites in Egypt. In 1171, he proclaimed the fall of the Fatimid state, declaring himself the Prince of the Muslims in Egypt, reaffirming his allegiance to the Sunni Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Thus, Saladin began the unification of the Islamic world under the banner of Sunni Caliphate, laying the foundations of the Ayyubid dynasty, expansion and combat against the Crusaders. With his consolidation of Egypt, Saladin initiated expansionist plans to ensure that the Islamic region remained under unified and robust governance. In the Levant, battles against the Crusaders had commenced early on, yet the fall of Jerusalem into their hands in 1099 was a grave shock to the Islamic world. Saladin, who received the moniker Saladin, meaning the righteous faith, from his contemporaries, emerged as the archenemy of the Crusaders. He recognized that unifying the Islamic lands and reclaiming Jerusalem would demand considerable military effort. In 1174, following Nur ad-Din Zengi's death, Saladin began to execute plans to liberate territories that had fallen into Crusader hands, foremost among them Jerusalem. He first directed his efforts toward northern Syria to put an end to the numerous small Crusader principalities, such as the Principality of Antioch and the County of Tripoli. His primary objective was to isolate Jerusalem from the remaining Crusader forces, after which he would focus on a decisive battle to restore the sacred city. The call to the Third Crusade. The genesis of determination and strife. In the autumn of 1187, the Christian world endured a profound historical shock following the loss of Jerusalem, a city that had been under Crusader control for centuries. Saladin the Ayyubid reclaimed the holy city with his own hands, achieving a remarkable military triumph in the famous Battle of Hattin, drastically shifting the balance of power in the Middle East. This loss was particularly devastating for Christians in Europe, as Jerusalem was regarded as the holy city, one that could not be permitted to remain under Muslim governance. The situation became increasingly dire when Pope Gregory VIII decided in the fall of 1187 that a severe and militaristic response was essential to reclaim Jerusalem. This declaration marked the inception of the Third Crusade, which represented the last hope for Christians to regain the sacred city, propelling Europe toward the precipice of another significant conflict in the East. The initial shock. The fall of Jerusalem before the campaign could commence. The fall of Jerusalem into Saladin's hands heralded a new chapter in the historical narratives of both the Islamic and Christian worlds. On October 2, 1187, following the decisive Battle of Hattin in July of that year, the Crusader army suffered a catastrophic retreat before the might of Saladin's Islamic forces. Jerusalem, which had been under Crusader control since 1099 along with the revered Church of the Holy Sepulchre, was once again in Muslim hands. For Christians in Europe, the loss transcended the physical domain of a city or territory. It was a blow to the very core of their faith. Jerusalem represented a monumental religious symbol, considered in the Middle Ages as the home of indisputable sacred sites. Consequently, restoring the city became a paramount objective for Christians, and its fall precipitated profound shock among clergy and nobility across Europe. The call to the campaign. Pope Gregory VIII's summons in this emotionally charged and politically fraught context. The high-ranking church officials convened in Rome, deciding to respond to the defeat with a new military plan. In November 1187, an act regarded at the time as a pinnacle of religious and political commitment, Pope Gregory VIII issued an official call for the Third Crusade. In this decree, the Pope urged kings and nobles throughout Europe to don the cross and embark on military campaigns against Muslims in a bid to reclaim Jerusalem, asserting that such efforts would grant them the forgiveness of sins and ensure their place in heaven. O faithful, Jerusalem is the city of the Lord and must return to his hands. If you seek paradise, you must raise the banner and fight in the name of God to recover the Holy Land. I kindly request that you like the video and subscribe to the channel as we continue the story. This summons served as a direct appeal to the nobles and princes of Europe, and Pope Gregory was acutely aware of how impactful these words would resonate in their hearts and minds. Previous crusades had successfully ignited religious fervor, and thus the Pope believed that rekindling similar enthusiasm during this period would be paramount for the restoration of Jerusalem. The European response. The launch of the crusading campaigns quickly, numerous European kings and nobles heeded the papal call. Several factors compelled these leaders to participate in the Third Crusade, including deep-seated religious motivations to fight for the restoration of the Holy City, as well as political ambitions. For them, the Crusades represented an opportunity to expand their power and spheres of influence in the East. Among the leaders who responded to the summons was Richard the Lionheart, King of England, who enjoyed immense popularity in Europe due to his military prowess and bravery in battle. Additionally, Philip Augustus, King of France, resolved to join the campaign, announcing his army's readiness to engage in the East. Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, also decided to participate in the campaign despite his advancing age and committed to sending his formidable forces. Campaign preparations. Readiness and mobilization. Once King Richard of England and other leaders confirmed their determination to partake in the Third Crusade, military preparations commenced. Each king called upon their armies to gather in major European ports to ready themselves for a voyage across the Mediterranean towards Islamic territories. The objective of the campaign, as made clear from the outset, was to reclaim Jerusalem from Saladin the Ayyubid. The Crusaders believed this undertaking would be decisive, assuming Jerusalem would swiftly return to their custody, much like prior crusades. However, the path would not be devoid of challenges. The lands upon which the Crusader banner would rise were fraught with threats from Islamic armies, particularly Saladin's, who had demonstrated considerable acumen in warfare and leadership. The Crusaders would face an organized military force under the command of a cunning strategist, Saladin the Ayyubid, who had unified most Islamic lands in the Levant and Egypt into a singularly powerful state. Challenges and obstacles. Coordination failures and political turmoil during the preparations for the campaign. Numerous challenges beset the Crusader leaders. Among the most significant were the political tensions between the kings and military commanders. For instance, a rift emerged between Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus over their personal policies and disagreements regarding the division of spoils following the recapture of Jerusalem. Additionally, the German army under Frederick Barbarossa faced mobility issues traversing the difficult terrain of Anatolia, hindering the campaign's progress and diminishing their hopes for rapid success. The sudden death of Frederick Barbarossa. The most startling turn of events for the Third Crusade was the death of Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, who had chosen to cross Anatolia with his army. In August 1190, Barbarossa drowned in the Seyhan River during the crossing, sending shockwaves through the ranks of the German army. This tragedy severely impacted the military strategy, forcing many German soldiers to return home after losing their leader. Thus, the Third Crusade began to lose much of its military might. The campaign across the Mediterranean. As the Crusader forces readied themselves for their crossing of the Mediterranean, they encountered various logistical challenges. Despite these tribulations, Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus successfully forged a treaty with the Byzantine Empire, allowing them passage through Byzantine territories on their way to Palestine. This arrangement was of immense significance, as the Byzantine Empire at that time had experienced strain in its relations with Western powers. However, Richard's diplomatic skills enabled him to establish a lasting alliance with the Byzantines. The call to the Crusade. The birth of a legend. This call for the Third Crusade marked the commencement of a legend featuring the Crusaders as they endeavored once more to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim rule. The campaign faced numerous challenges from its inception, yet the pledge of noble kings emphasizing the necessity of restoring the sacred city suggested that the conflict between Muslims and Christians during that era would not cease easily. European leaders in the Third Crusade. Three figures with one goal. In the summer of 1189, armies from across Europe gathered under a single banner, united in a common purpose: to reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims, after it had been retaken by Saladin the Ayyubid in 1187. The Third Crusade, which later became known in history as the Crusade of Kings, was not confined to a single army or leader. Rather, it drew the attention of the Christian world, featuring three of the most prominent military commanders of the time. This campaign ignited great hopes in the hearts of Europeans, as failure to recover Jerusalem would signify the collapse of the last bastion of Christianity in the East. The leaders were Richard the Lionheart, King of England; Philip Augustus, King of France; Frederick Barbarossa, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Each harbored dreams of personal glory, their eyes fixed on the same objective: Jerusalem. However, as with all major wars, the path to this goal was not strewn with roses. It was fraught with battles, conflicts, and disagreements that would alter the course of events. Frederick Barbarossa. The brave emperor and treacherous death. Frederick Barbarossa, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, was the first to decide to march eastward in 1189. Renowned as one of the greatest military leaders in Europe at that time, he was known for his battlefield prowess and political acumen. He harbored a dream of achieving glory for his people and reclaiming the Holy Lands. Yet, in addition to his personal ambitions, Frederick faced significant internal pressures. His empire comprised diverse regions both culturally and religiously, necessitating the consolidation of his authority therein. Despite his advanced age, Frederick Barbarossa embarked on the crusade, determined to lead his army to a decisive victory. In 1190, he commanded a colossal army through Byzantine territories toward Anatolia, striving to reach the Holy Lands. However, events did not unfold as planned. Midway, specifically at the Seyhan River in Anatolia, Frederick encountered an unexpected tragedy. He drowned while crossing the river, sending shockwaves through his army, which had anticipated proceeding to Palestine under his leadership. Yet fate had another opinion. Frederick Barbarossa's untimely demise in a sudden drowning led to the disintegration of the German army, with many soldiers returning home in the wake of their leader's loss. Thus, one of Europe's greatest military leaders departed the scene, leaving his dream of reclaiming Jerusalem unrealized. Philip Augustus. The astute king and political calculations following Frederick's death, the campaign took a different trajectory, though it did not cease. Philip II Augustus, King of France, had resolved to participate in the Third Crusade from the outset. Philip was one of the most politically savvy monarchs in Europe, recognized for his strategic insight. He understood that this campaign represented a significant opportunity to bolster his position in Europe. Philip displayed less religious fervor compared to Richard or Frederick. He harbored his own agenda to expand his influence over Christian territories in the East, particularly those under Crusader control. He perceived the Crusade as a chance to strengthen his kingdom and enhance its prestige in Europe. However, tensions began to escalate between him and Richard the Lionheart, King of England, rooted in political differences and individual ambitions. Philip arrived in Cyprus with his army in 1191, where he had to contend with King Isaac Comnenus, who had fortified himself on the island. Philip seized Cyprus following a brief battle, adding to the campaign's successes in the east. Nevertheless, his disputes with Richard the Lionheart continued to intensify. Ultimately, Philip Augustus decided to return to France, leaving Richard to pursue the mission alone. This decision profoundly impacted the campaign, as it diminished French support for military operations. Richard the Lionheart, the heroic leader of the campaign, Richard the Lionheart, King of England, emerged as the noble knight shouldering the burden of the Third Crusade. Celebrated for his bravery and exceptional military leadership, Richard possessed both the strength and the charisma to make him a pivotal commander in the conflict. He led a vast army toward the east, with his foremost dream being the reclamation of Jerusalem. Richard was known for his iron will and refusal to retreat under any circumstances. The shadow of the Battle of Hattin loomed heavily over the Christians, and Richard was acutely aware of the immense responsibility resting on his armies. Despite his disagreements with Philip Augustus, he remained resolute in his commitment to the campaign until its conclusion. Richard believed that restoring Jerusalem would be one of the greatest achievements attainable for Christianity, driving him to labor tirelessly to realize this goal. In the Battle of Acre in 1191, Richard achieved a major victory against Saladin's forces, reclaiming the city from the Crusaders after a prolonged siege. Despite this triumph, circumstances began to complicate as the campaign advanced toward Jerusalem. Richard understood that his army could not directly assault Jerusalem without facing fierce resistance. Saladin's forces were poised to defend the city with all their strength. Yet the situation intensified in complexity. The siege of Jerusalem proved arduous, and supplies for the Crusader army dwindled. During this time, negotiations with Saladin commenced. Ultimately, a truce was reached with Saladin in September 1192, allowing Christians to enter Jerusalem freely without conflict, on the condition that the city remained under Islamic control. Conclusion: the campaign's end and the onset of division after Philip Augustus opted to return to France. While Richard the Lionheart persisted in battle, the campaign approached its conclusion. Although the ultimate aim, the reclamation of Jerusalem, was not achieved, Richard displayed military brilliance and diplomatic skill throughout numerous critical junctures. However, the Third Crusade, in which these leaders participated, was not merely a struggle for land but a contest of personal and political ambitions. Each leader harbored a distinct objective, and though they failed to secure a definitive victory, each left an indelible mark on the annals of Crusader history. Thus, while the Third Crusade may not have fulfilled its grand objective, it accomplished something significant. The vivid images of these leaders attempting to reclaim Jerusalem from Saladin the Ayyubid permeated collective memory, as they returned to their homelands bearing both their disappointments and their glories, leaving a profound legacy in the history of the East-West conflict. The arrival of Richard and Philip to the Mediterranean. The journey east begins in 1190. Richard the Lionheart, King of England, and Philip Augustus, King of France, came together to embark upon a quest for Jerusalem as part of the Third Crusade. Their singular objective was clear: to reclaim the Holy City from the grasp of Saladin the Ayyubid. However, the onset of their journey was fraught with challenges. At that time, Europe was a continent rife with political turmoil and internal strife. Yet the summons from Pope Gregory VIII united kings in a common goal: the restoration of Jerusalem. Richard and Philip, once political adversaries, resolved to unite their forces for this grand military endeavor. The journey for the two leaders commenced from European ports, as they set sail across the Mediterranean toward the Christian territories in the east. Richard, known for his strategic acumen, opted to traverse through Italy, while Philip chose a route via Greece. The Mediterranean served as their primary passage, but the voyage was not devoid of difficulties. Along the way, turbulent waves and unstable weather threatened the safety of their fleets. Nevertheless, Richard and Philip pressed onward, determined to achieve their shared goal of reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim rule. Arrival in Cyprus. A pivotal stop. Richard and Philip's fleets reached Cyprus in 1191. The island was under the dominion of King Isaac Comnenus, who had recently taken the throne and sought to establish himself as an independent ruler, free from Byzantine control. However, Isaac was known for his tyrannical behavior and exhibited hostility toward the Crusaders passing through his island en route to the east. Yet, circumstances in Cyprus did not unfold as Isaac anticipated. On May 6, 1191, upon Richard's arrival, he confronted Isaac directly. In a brief yet fierce battle, Isaac's forces were defeated, and Richard seized control of the island. This marked the beginning of unexpected developments in the campaign. Richard sought not only to proceed toward Jerusalem but harbored ambitions for Cyprus as well. Following Isaac's surrender, Richard resolved to make the island a vital supply base for his army, choosing Ayia Napa, a location deemed strategically important, as the center for his military operations. Isaac, meanwhile, was captured and sent to England, where he spent the remainder of his days imprisoned. Cyprus thus became a crucial base for the Crusader invasion of the Holy Land, and this swift victory invigorated Richard's army, enhancing their resolve to continue the journey toward Jerusalem. The Siege of Acre. The onset of military conflict having secured Cyprus, Richard and Philip advanced toward Palestine, their sights set on the city of Acre, regarded as a key gateway to Jerusalem. Acre was a long-standing Crusader-held city, besieged by Saladin for several years, with its inhabitants enduring despair, starvation, and the looming threat of capture by Saladin's forces. The Crusader army reached Acre in April 1191, initiating what would become one of the most renowned sieges in the history of the Crusades. The Crusaders commenced digging trenches and employing heavy artillery, such as trebuchets and siege engines. In an effort to penetrate the city's walls, however, the Siege of Acre was no simple endeavor. Saladin had deployed all his forces in the vicinity, continuously supplying the defenders within the city. This was not solely a military confrontation. It evolved into a psychological war. Saladin understood that Acre was the threshold to Jerusalem, and he defended it with all available strength. As time progressed, the situation within the city deteriorated. The lengthy siege took its toll on both the Crusaders and Saladin's soldiers. The city walls trembled under the relentless strikes of the Crusader siege engines, while water became scarce within the confines of the city. After several months of continuous fighting, the defenders began to feel that holding out was becoming an impossible task. The fall of Acre, the destruction of victory's illusions in July 1191, after a siege lasting more than 2 months, the Crusader army, led by Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus, finally breached the walls of Acre in a decisive battle. The city's defenders surrendered, and Acre fell into the hands of the Crusaders after being under Muslim control for years. This moment marked a significant victory for the Crusaders. Richard, who had demonstrated remarkable tactical skill throughout the siege, entered the city triumphantly. Yet, this triumph was not without its bloodshed. Many Muslim defenders lost their lives during the assault, resulting in substantial losses for Saladin. The political and military outcome following the fall of Acre, Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus found themselves in an exceptionally potent position. The city was now under Crusader control, providing them with a crucial launching point for their campaign toward Jerusalem. Despite his defeat, Saladin remained a formidable presence in the region and did not abandon hope of reclaiming the city as the Crusaders entered Acre. The dream of achieving their grand goal, the reclamation of Jerusalem, was one step closer, though the path still remained long and arduous. The reasons for the campaign's failure. Internal challenges and disagreements. Despite the tactical successes of the Third Crusade, several factors contributed to its ultimate failure to attain its final goal. These reasons can be summarized as follows. Disputes among Crusader leaders. One of the most significant challenges faced by the campaign arose from the disagreements between Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus. Although they had initially embarked on the crusade together, tensions escalated due to personal and political differences. In April 1191, following the fall of Acre, Philip opted to return to France, leaving Richard to pursue the campaign alone. Such schisms weakened the Crusader front and adversely affected the coordination of military operations. The death of Frederick Barbarossa. The death of Emperor Frederick Barbarossa in 1190 had a profound impact on the campaign. The Holy Roman Empire was a crucial component of the Crusader alliance, and his absence diminished the campaign's effectiveness, especially since the German army he led had suffered a significant blow following his passing. Geographical conditions. The Crusaders faced fierce resistance in regions characterized by difficult terrain, particularly around Jerusalem. Saladin had fortified his strongholds meticulously, rendering access to the city exceedingly challenging. Islamic military strength. Saladin the Ayyubid demonstrated exceptional military and diplomatic prowess in managing the conflict. He managed to maintain unity among his forces in the face of adversities and exhibited resilience against the Crusader campaign, despite sustaining losses. Richard's return to England. Disappointment following partial success after the signing of the truce, Richard the Lionheart returned to England, albeit without realizing his ultimate goal of reclaiming Jerusalem. While he succeeded in retaking key coastal territories, such as Acre and Tiberias, the absence of Jerusalem remained a source of disappointment. Nonetheless, his return to England was marked by fanfare, with his subjects welcoming him as a hero. Yet, he was not entirely satisfied, as he was keenly aware that the crusade had not culminated in the grand success he had envisioned. Additionally, he had navigated numerous crises throughout the campaign, including political and military challenges with Philip Augustus. The campaign's impact on the Christian and Islamic worlds. Although the attempt to reclaim Jerusalem was unsuccessful, the Third Crusade exerted significant influences on the ongoing conflict between Christians and Muslims in the Middle East. Stabilization of coastal areas. The Crusaders firmly established themselves in coastal cities, such as Acre and Tiberias, which would remain under their control for several decades following the campaign. The consolidation of Saladin's reputation. Saladin emerged as a formidable leader who succeeded in uniting the Islamic world, enhancing his stature among Muslims. His name became synonymous with victory and wise leadership in Islamic memory. The rejuvenation of the crusading movement. While the campaign failed to recover Jerusalem, its legacy cast a long shadow over subsequent crusades. Future crusading efforts would arise, but the Third Crusade marked a pivotal transition between two phases of these conflicts. Conclusion. An end, yet not the finale. The Third Crusade concluded in profound disappointment for Christians in Europe, as Jerusalem remained out of reach, although some partial successes were achieved. While the campaign did not attain its grand objective, it represented a crucial chapter in the history of the Crusades, laying the groundwork for military and political developments that would influence East-West relations for many years to come. I hope you enjoy the video. Please consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a like. Farewell, my friends.